Welcome, everybody. I'm just going to share my screen. I want to make sure people have the instructions in case they haven't seen it already to get to the word cloud. All right, so the basics here, as Cathy was just explaining, please add ENG, ESP, or FRA in front of your name to let us know about your language preference. If you know other languages, that's fine, but we're going to be having sessions moderated in those languages during the open breakouts, the first session of breakouts. And we want to make sure we can put you into the right group. When you come in, if you go to pollev.com/CCL123, which you can click on in the chat, you'll see an opportunity to answer a poll. It's a simple question. What about 2021 gives you hope? And then we're going to show the answers as they start coming in, which I'm going to do momentarily. Allow you to join. I don't know if Sarah's with us, if you know the answer to this. I don't know if that works outside the United States. My apologies for that.
Oh, I'm sorry. I do not know if it works outside of the United States either.
Yeah, so if you do want to respond, I think the best way is to just go to pollev.com/CCL123. So welcome, everybody. Thank you for joining us for this first Global Strategy and Action meeting for Citizens Climate International 2021. We're just starting out here with this poll, looking for people to share, what are your hopes for 2021? It's just a way of getting a little bit acquainted with how people are feeling, what we're planning, what our goals are for next year. It's great to see these ideas coming in. Amazing historical moment that we're in, people being connected, $170 per ton. I'm guessing that is Canada. I see my name in there, but I think that's a reference to Joe Biden. But good to see. Fiat dividend, rejoining the world, I think, is a very important theme, and it'll be a theme for us today as well. I'm really glad to see all the activity right here, all the energy. Amazing, amazing to see. I'm just going to capture a few of these for later reference, because we're going to come back to talk about what some of these hopes are. I'm going to jump out of here now, and please do keep sending in your thoughts if you want to. We will come back and capture as much of it as we can. But I'm now going to jump over to the presentation and get us started here. Just a quick overview of the meeting. And first of all, welcome. We have over 200 people registered for this workshop, which is amazing. People being ready to put their time into this kind of work, shared planning, sharing of ideas. For those of you who don't know, I'm Joe Robertson. I'm Citizens Climate's Global Strategy Director. What we're going to do in this meeting is we're going to go through a series of open plenaries where we're all in the same space, and then breakouts, and then back to plenaries. Our first set of breakouts is going to be more or less random. You're going to be with a group of people who are not necessarily from your region. There may be some selection by language, but the goal here is simply to have an open conversation about hopes and challenges, aims and values, not so much about strategy and action. And then we're going to report back in the regional breakouts. After that, we'll do more of that strategy and action planning. Now, why are we here? We're here in part because the world that we're living in is in a state of multiple crises. We have worsening climate disruption. We have unprecedented, at least in human history, biodiversity collapse. We are living through the 6th mass extinction, and that's going to affect everything, including those aspects of everyday life that people think are removed from nature. We have the COVID pandemic itself. We have the related economic crisis. Just for those of you who aren't living it or haven't seen it up close, what is happening in that economic crisis is that right now we are seeing the largest and fastest increase in poverty and hunger in modern history across the world. Even in wealthy countries like the United States, we're seeing 100 million people needing food aid. So it is a very serious crisis that we're in. And we're also seeing income inequality get worse, which is the worst possible time for that to be happening. And so that is putting us in a situation where we need to think seriously about resetting the boundaries. For those of you who haven't seen this particular slide before, I just want to take you into this moment a few years ago. This was the COP24 in 2018 in Poland, the 24th annual UN climate negotiations. And at that global meeting, we had the whole world gathered together, and the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change presented for the first time to the delegates its special report on global warming of 1.5 degrees Celsius. Now, I want you to consider that everyone in that room has spent a long time studying this kind of thing, and they have seen this report. They have far more information probably than what was presented and discussed in that plenary session. It's their job to know this stuff. And in that kind of session, you can't present a lot of detail. So they're basically going through the headline issues. They're going through the major tipping points. They're showing some of the key data, some maps that show how the world is going to change. And I want you to focus on how the people seem so transfixed by the information. Now, as serious as these people are, that is not normally what you see in that venue. What you normally see in that big plenary session is people coming and going. There are thousands of people. People come in for a few minutes. Some people sit there and rest and do their work while the negotiations are going on. Every delegation has people who have to come in, intervene, and then be off to another meeting quickly. It's a constant buzz. That room was silent, still, and full the whole time. I've never seen that happen before. The only other time I can remember that happening is when you have either an opening or closing ceremony or a major event like the Paris Agreement itself. And what I think was happening there was that people were recognizing that they were in the control room. This is on their shoulders. All of this grave change is up to them. Well, part of our response to that is to organize people to help their governments get this right. And so we really believe that the future is in the hands of organized people working as responsible citizens to help make their societies work better. Now, in the new year, we will be formally launching Citizens Climate International. For most of you, nothing is really going to change. This is just a new organization that's part of the Citizens Climate family that is meant to make it easier for us to support all of our work around the world. We will be supporting the core mission of Citizens Climate Lobby, of course, empowerment of citizen volunteers to build political will for a livable world. We'll also be deepening our engagement in international processes, and we want to make sure that part of that deepening is that your voices are heard there. And of course, we'll also be managing formal partnerships within a growing family of citizens climate organizations. I'll just give a brief shout out to Citizens Climate Europe, which was founded earlier in 2020, and as an example of that. Now, how do we take on these interlocking challenges? We've looked for a way to put our values together, take stock of the multiple crises that we're in, and put forward a series of ideas that are going to allow governments to think coherently, but also comprehensively about the major changes that they need to be thinking about, that they need to be making in 2021. And a number of us who are on this call today spent months developing thinking around how we would do that. What would those principles be? Are they things like, reinvest in renewables, or are they something deeper than that? And that's how we have these very high level, very sort of general principles. The goal of these 6 principles is that all the things that governments are doing to have a sustainable recovery should really orient towards all 6 of these things. The first 3 are recognizing facts. We are all future builders. The things we do change the world. Health is a fabric of well-being and value. It's not just that I'm okay today or you're okay today, and those 2 things are unrelated. We're watching in real time how interconnected our health is, but it's more than just personal physical health. It's an overall state of well-being and opportunity. Resilience is a baseline imperative, not a high sort of ideal aspiration. Everyone should be living in a society that is designed to be resilient. We should leave no one behind. These are now action principles. We should design to transcend crisis, meaning reset the boundaries so that the crises we're facing don't exist in the future. And we need to maximize integrative value creation. That sounds really complicated, but what it basically means is if you invest in smart agriculture, you help the ocean. You also help people be healthier. You also help solve climate change. That's integrative value creation, doing more than one thing by making wise choices. Governments are set up to do that, but they're not in the habit of doing that on the level that they need to. And so this becomes an opportunity for us to walk in as citizens and say, can you help steer us to this better future? We have some ideas. And so I'm just going to stop there for now and say this is part of the general context for today's meeting. And I'm going to hand over to Cathy to continue the presentation. Cathy.
Thank you, Joe. And I want to thank everybody for being here today. As a project manager and a big picture seer, I always like to begin with the end in mind. So I'd like you to all think, what is the whole purpose of this? What is the end goal? Well, it's not the total end goal, but the medium-term end goal. And so for 2021, we are working towards helping our volunteers in 61 countries change the global narrative on carbon pricing so that when we go to our governments and they go to the G7 and the G20 and COP26, they will be empowered to do more for the people and the planet. And I just want to contextualize that a little bit. Citizens Climate Lobby has been going to COP26 since Paris in 2015. We started joining the G7 and the G20 civil society engagement networks that work together to formulate a common message to feed up to our G7 and G20 leaders since 2017. So information that you give us goes to these civil society groups and goes to these governments, and then that helps them know that they've got the political will back home if they want to do more. So we are conduits. These are networks that that strengthen the political will on the planet and allow things to move forward. Politicians do want to do things, they just need to know we've got their back. So in 2021, we're all going to be working in our own context, in our own countries, in our own communities for building the political will for a livable world. And hopefully for most of us, that is to focus on carbon pricing, understanding that some of us, that's not always possible and other things must come first. Next slide, please. I was told not to bring cigars or gloat by one of my volunteers. So bear with me right now. Canada did something remarkable on Friday in the lead up to the Ambition Summit on Saturday. So the Climate Ambition Summit for celebrating 5 years of the Paris Agreement. Yes, the Paris Agreement is not enough. And yes, what Canada has planned is not enough, but we must celebrate every single victory that we have. And I think this was the biggest victory ever in my 10 years of doing this work. When I started reading that what was the government was going to enact, I started to shake. I mean, I called Mark Reynolds like as I was reading it, and I couldn't even breathe. It was so what Canada did on Friday was improve our carbon pricing policy. So previously, our carbon pricing policy in Canada stopped at 2022 at $50 a ton. It didn't have border carbon adjustments. And it needed some more work, especially with, strengthening what's happening at the subnational level. And I'm reading it, and it says Canada's carbon pricing policy will increase at $50 a ton from 2020 per year from 2022 all the way up to 2030. So we have that gradually increasing gentle market signal to transition our economy happening. All the money's going to go back to the people. Yeah, it's so exciting. And then they said they're going to study border carbon adjustments with partners such as the EU. It's very exciting moment. So, and we get the money back. This is the best part. Canada's carbon pricing policy was, we were getting the money back in our income tax once a year. Now we're going to get quarterly payments. People are going to see those payments. It was like they cut and pasted the leave behind that we've been wanting, like, which is our lobbying ask for the last 2 years, cut and pasted and put it into this document. It was so awesome. So yeah, we've leapt forward in Canada, but how did we do that? Joe, can you get to the next slide, please? The incredible volunteers we have been building the political will for the last 10 years. We have 42 active chapters covering about a third of the Canadian, I was going to say ridings, but nobody in the world used that term, constituencies. And there's 338 constituencies. They do the grassroots engagement. They do the grass tops engagement. They do media relations and all sorts of publishing. And yes, they lobbied the government over 1,000 times, which is not bad for a group that, has no paid staff. So, yeah, so this is how we did it. We focused on these 5 levers of political will, and they worked. So, and today, when you're thinking about what to be doing in 2021, fall back on the 5 levers of political will, and obviously fall back on the CCL values, but we'll be doing more of that planning. Right today, we're going to be brainstorming and a SWOT analysis. So, that's that. And we're going to just look at key dates in 2021. Like I said, we're coming back twice together to make sure that we solidify our plans. It's not possible to, in a 2-hour session, plan how to build the political will in 61 countries across the planet. So we're going to need 3 sessions. Today is brainstorming. With a little bit of thinking about planning on Wednesday, January 27th, at the same time, maybe a different Zoom room. We'll be coming back to further our planning, and then more of a check-in on March 31st. So a progress report if all goes well. I also wanted to remind everybody that Thursday, April 22nd is the 51st Earth Day, and we kind of missed it last year, didn't we? Because of this little virus called COVID. So I think we'll have to make the 51st a great celebration. As well, Fridays for Future has plans for Saturday, April 24th. I mean, Greta's part of this, so there's going to be a massive global concert, so start thinking about that. There's the UN World Environment Day that happens every year on June the 5th. There's the Citizens Climate Lobby International Conference, where again, we'll be meeting. We'll be there. So we're inviting you to come and meet with us there. We'll have our own session for international people. So be sure to show up there. That's what those 3 greens are. So circle your calendars. In July, the exact date is not known, but the United Kingdom is the president of not only the COP this year, but also the G7. And that's huge. And we're working behind the scenes to make sure that carbon pricing is a major push on the G7. And we're having lots of fun, aren't we, James and Jess? And, so there'll be the G7 Leaders Summit at that point. And as well, on October 16th, there will be the Fridays for Future Global Concert. And then the G20 Leaders Summit, Italy is the G20 leader. It'll be October 30th and 31st. And look at what happens the day after. Like, look at the synergy we got going here. So this is 2021. And the next slide, please. So at this moment, if there's any important dates for you locally or regionally or nationally or internationally that you think we're missing, if you could start putting those in the chat, that would be wonderful. And all of you, we want you to consider as you're planning, how can you work within this context? Like, especially what are you going to do for Earth Day? How are you going to get involved in the Fridays for Future concert? What are you going to do for the World Environment Day? How will you possibly work with, pushing towards helping the G7 Leaders Summit, if that's applicable, like making things happen there, etc. So, yeah. So are there any other dates that we've missed? You can put in the chat. So now we need to give suggestions for the breakouts. So I'm going to suggest just Sara, you pair us up, because I think we'll be okay. We're going to try to have about 6 to 10 people per, okay, May 25th, Africa Day of Action. Great. Okay, so sorry, that's my ADD kicking in because of information overload. So we're going into open breakouts. All of us are going to be pushed into open breakout rooms. Really important to put your mother tongue in front of your name, and then your second language. If you are really not comfortable in English, just put your mother tongue, and we'll definitely push you into a breakout room that is in your mother tongue. They'll be for 20 minutes. Please be mindful of time and let each other share. So these are facilitated groups, and we want you to answer these questions. Where do we want to go? Or think of it in your hopes for 2021. It's a brainstorm. It's awesome. Just like, enjoy. And keep in mind, what role does community play? And how we get there will be discussed afterwards, like in the next session. But so please focus on sharing your experiences and hopes. So questions?
Okay, so welcome back, everybody. It seems like there was some really good discussions. Georgie, how are you? Good to see you. It's great to see everybody enthusiastic, to hear people's ideas about where we need to go. And I was just processing the word cloud, and we're going to come back and look at that later. There are a lot of great moments of inspiration embedded there. So what we're going to do here is we're going to ask everybody who facilitated one of the breakouts or someone that they designated to give a quick 1-minute report back. I'm going to ask Sara to give us a sequence for the breakouts. Maybe we do one in English, and then we do Spanish and French, and then we do the rest of them. And what I'm going to do is put up a slide where we're going to document some of what you're sharing. Anything that's missed that you don't see showing up from your quick 1-minute reports, we want to capture that, so please do share it. And if you're a facilitator, you have the notes, so you can always throw your ideas in there. So here we go.
All right, let's start with the breakout room that Tami Kellogg was in.
Marlo, would you like to report?
Yes, I'll report on that. So we had some really good discussion. And one of the themes that emerged was our hopes for better communication. So both within our communities and as a greater communities. So one thing that really stood out was that we need to be able to communicate with each other according to what our values are. So for example, people value family and the health of their family. So we need to communicate in a way that actually honors that. Also, as a greater community, we've been hearing from Europe and Africa that we need to have better general discussion as a greater community to push these narratives for carbon pricing and border carbon adjustments better. Another thing about community is within schools. We had 3 people share that, communicating within schools and to schools can be really powerful. And then the last thing is with finances. We shared that going into 2021 and recovering from COVID, we need to have a cohesive approach to financing, resiliency to climate change. So that's something that we found that was really important. And I think that's it from us, unless Tami had anything to share.
That sounds great.
Thank you, Marlo. That was brilliant.
Great. Next, let's hear from the Spanish breakout room that Isatis and Salemi helped facilitate.
Should I? Okay. So we heard a lot about our hopes for 2021 to expand CCL as community, and as well feeling hopeful about what the international relationships might do to increase climate ambition at a national level. And we started to share some of the opportunities for carbon pricing in the national level to bring the level of NDCs, or like the contributions for climate, to the level that they need to be. So we heard a little bit about what is context. I think it's instead of like making it super international and global, we try to localize the context and try to bring up like how can that relationship between what's happening with like the COVID and like the carbon prices and other mechanisms that are influenced elsewhere can bring home some victories for trying to price pollution and make sure that our emissions are on track.
Thank you, Isatis. Brilliant.
Wonderful. Next, let's hear from Cathy and Jacques' breakout room.
Thanks, Sara. So in our breakup groups, in terms of the hopes and aims for 2021, one common theme that emerged was that everyone was generally hopeful about next year. But specifically, we heard things like, the US elections and the prospect of the United States, getting back on the Paris Accord and working towards, climate resolutions and things like that. And in terms of community, we had things like, the community is a superpower, and really moving to 2021, we should acknowledge the fact that we're a global community and everyone should be involved in the process, decision-making processes. And so that was really interesting to see as well. So that was pretty much what we could get.
Great, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Next up, Broad's breakout room. If you're there, you're muted.
Oh, thank you. Yes, we wanted to see the success in Canada to spread to the other provinces and beyond Canada. That was, really, really important. We also wanted to see a lot more publicity for carbon fee and dividend, and particularly around the COP. And also very, very, very important to overcome some of the conservative resistance and find ways to reach out to conservatives and enable them to come on board. And I shared my wish that we would very soon see a determined but friendly race to zero amongst all the nations. And we saw the role of community as being really, really important in terms of raising awareness and unifying efforts across different parts of society, creating the non-partisan approach that is just so important. And of course, carbon fee and dividend was in there in a very important way. So lots of hopes and lots of reliance and faith in community.
Great, thank you. Next up, let's hear from Rituaj's breakout room.
We had participants from 4 continents in the breakout, North America, Africa, Asia, and Europe. And the underlying hope that was expressed came from the US rejoining the Paris Agreement and a COVID-19 vaccine coming out, giving hope that the focus will shift next year to the climate crisis. And we also had more insights about how different provinces in Canada are challenging the carbon policy in the country, and the likelihood of an election next year, and what is likely to happen. And we also heard about how carbon fee is not currently in the agenda of politicians in Asia, in India particularly, or in Africa, but how we are working to build up the organization that's required to lobby with different stakeholders. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Next up is Jess's breakout room.
Great, thanks, Sarah. Yeah. So we had a lot of different reflections on the meaning of community, how we experience community within CCL, and how we experience community as part of a larger global climate coalition. Community for all of us had roots in finding and sharing core values like respect, integrity, and a search for justice. It also had roots in the desire to determine a focus and scope for our individual actions and how those actions contribute to a larger movement. Community also helped us find the ways in which we are able to help each other build resilience in the face of the impending climate crisis. In terms of our hopes and needs moving forward, we have to continue building community across CCL and the larger global climate coalition. And we identified a need to connect more people to the concepts of sustainability and climate action. So even if that means that they don't necessarily find a place in CCL because their own core values do not match with our own, or our solution to climate change is not something that they necessarily agree with, we have to make sure that every person in our lives can in some way be involved in creating a livable future. And then finally, we were talking about the importance of making sure that the narratives from the most vulnerable communities being impacted by climate change are not lost in these larger discussions of how to move forward and how to create global action. Thanks.
Wonderful, thanks, Jess. And next up was David Michael's breakout room.
Thank you, Sarah. So Paul will share on behalf of our room. Paul, over to you.
Okay, thanks. I didn't write any notes, so if anybody wants to jump in and add something, then please do. Yeah, we had a great group of people in our room from India, Sierra Leone, Nigeria, Australia, the UK, and Uganda. So naturally, we had an international perspective. We wanted to see carbon charging from an international point of view. And in terms of climate justice, any dividend should be distributed internationally as well. Obviously, that's aiming very high. So our Australian friend actually reminded us that he'd be really satisfied with just stopping coal mining in Australia as a first step. And we have wonderful contributions from many countries whereby people are really going into the community and explaining to the community the implications of fee and dividend. And there's a lot of pressure on governments, especially in Sierra Leone and Uganda, to introduce some kind of carbon charge. So yeah, international perspective, climate justice, and a community mobilization point of view. And as I say, jump in anybody else if I've missed any points out. Thank you.
Okay, it's the other Paul on the call here. I'm going to report David Michael's group now. And we had the diversity from, I think, probably -7 or 8 degrees Celsius here in Canada to 35 degrees Celsius over in Nigeria. We only talked about hope. We're saying that most governments are not denying climate change now, and they're actually paying attention to it. And policy like carbon pricing is actually starting to be seen as just and making things better for everyone, maybe except oil company executives. Climate can become a unifying issue. Sometimes people have never heard of things like carbon pricing, and it makes so much sense that it brings them along. Science has been seen as critical during the COVID pandemic, and governments have no choice but to pay more attention to science than they have. And there's a lot of mobilization globally, a lot of activism, which brings us hope. Finally, technology has improved, is racing ahead, electric buses and everything else. The whole business world and the investment world are starting to leave oil and gas behind, which is incredibly promising. And on a personal note, I just want to encourage everybody to read Seth Klein's book called A Good War, which is how to really raise your ambition around what we can do with climate change. As a climate activist, I've always been asking for small things, and I'm starting to ask for great big things because we need to, and we can, and we can do it. Thank you.
Wonderful. And I believe that our last breakout room was James Collis's breakout room, so I'll hand it over to you now. But facilitators, if I missed you, go ahead and shoot me a message.
Hi, Sarah. Thank you. So as Paul once said, we had a very vibrant discussion in our group with an international perspective. There are probably 3 themes came out of that were significant. The first one was the aspiration for both international cooperation and an element of international justice in that as well, recognizing that not all things are equal. The second big theme were a series of hopes around the national work that was going on. But what was particularly interesting there that was common was that the work in other nations or economic blocs was clearly having an effect that was positive in that it creates opportunity for dialogue in other countries that haven't advanced as far. So that was a particularly nice link to the first one. And the third theme was around the challenges of community, both in terms of the importance of engaging the youth, but also some of the challenges in the public dialogue because of the number of people who are disengaged or prioritizing other things, and the challenge of communicating what we care about and understand in a way that the public can understand and be supportive of. So those are the 3 themes, but I think Paul touched on some of the international flavor earlier, which was lovely.
Brilliant. That was really, really good feedback from all of the sessions. And, you know, I think we can take a look at it here. We're going to process all of this and share it with you later on. I just want to quickly go through what we're doing next. The next round of breakouts are regional breakouts. And we want to take some of what we've just talked about, the hopes and aims, our sense of community and the role it can play, what we as citizens can do, and importantly, as a team, what we can do. So for these regional breakouts, we're going to ask you to once again change your name in the Zoom chat. So just click on your name, go to select more, and then rename, and put in front of your name the region that you should be joining. So there's Africa, MENA, or Middle East, North Africa, together, Asia, the subcontinent of India, Pakistan, and Bangladesh as one, Europe, Latin America, Oceania, which includes Australia, the USA and Canada, and the UNFCCC process, not as a region so much as a discussion about where we're going there. These are going to be 35-minute breakout sessions. We want to do a SWOT analysis, meaning quick review of strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. You'll have a Jamboard up on the screen. This is what a Jamboard looks like. They can look very different depending on the way it's done, but this is one example. Essentially, you share ideas and the facilitators are going to document them this way. Here's a quick look at a SWOT analysis that we did on December 5th during the Citizens Climate Lobby Conference. People shared their ideas, we put them together, and we have brought some of that thinking into the structure of this meeting. Just keep in mind for this discussion, the five levers for building political will. These are the tools that we use to deal with these challenges. So not all of us have worked on all of these areas. Not all of us can for different reasons. But all five of these levers, what they are, to take the metaphor a little bit further, is they're a way of helping us do the heavy lifting, right? And so as we as citizens outside of government, outside of the halls of power, are trying to make change, it's a heavy lift, it's a big task. And these levers are meant to make it easier. Working as teams to be able to do this work in these ways, developing strong, cohesive local teams, local chapters, engaging the community. We heard a number of people talking about that, from hopes and aims, and also our sense of the value of community. Grass tops engagement is not so much about getting, VIPs on board. It's much more about working with trusted voices in the community to try to help people in government understand that this isn't just activists who talk like this. Media relations and publishing, this is done differently in different places, but it means a lot when people in power, in public office, see that local press are covering an issue. They start to pay more attention to it. And of course, lobbying government. We put it last here, not because it's last, it is the focus of what we do, but we put it last because these other things make it easier. So just keep all that in mind. Again, it's a 35-minute breakout session. We're going to do brief reporting back like we just did after this. But now I think you're going to be assigned to the breakout rooms by region. This process will take 5 to 10 minutes. So you have a little bit of a short break here. Feel free to get a drink of water, get some coffee, do whatever you need to do, but please do come back and make sure you join your regional breakout, and let's think about how we can take all of this brainstorming and turn it into something that changes the world in 2021.
To those just joining, welcome. Everyone is slowly joining us back from the breakout rooms. We'll all be here in the main room shortly. So give us just a minute while we all regroup here. All right, and officially welcome back to everyone. Thank you for all that great discussion in those breakouts.
Thank you for getting us all back here, Sara. Really good. I know we're short on time, so I think we should immediately jump into reporting back from those sessions. If you are able to quickly share your screen and show the Jamboard that your breakout was developing, you're welcome to do that, but we'd like each of these reports to be 2 minutes or less. So if you are not able to do that quickly, feel free to just report some of the things that were shared in your session as you wish. And I don't know, Sara, do you want to give us a sequence for the breakouts?
I can do that in the order that I created them. Let's start with Africa, and I'll put a little list in the chat so the rest of you all can be ready. So over to the Africa group now.
Can you all see my screen? I think so.
Yes, Jacques.
Great. So we had a very, very interesting conversation in the African group. So in terms of trends, we noted things like the youthful population on the rise around really just getting around the climate movement, and just the youthful population is really interested to see how they're really getting interested into the climate change movement, and they're really taking action. Other things that were mentioned around trends were things like I said, youth engagement was great to see. And also the fact that the lack of political will that has been historically noticeable in Africa is slowly is being bridged, because the government is now willing to collaborate with different groups, whether NGOs or civil society organizations around climate action. So that has been noticeable as well. Advocacy groups such as CCL has also helped tremendously in Africa in terms of creating awareness around climate action. So that was pointed out as well. In terms of weaknesses, one common theme that was highlighted was the lack of financial capacity in terms of climate action. That was mentioned multiple times. So the CCL chapter leaders mentioned their lack of financial capacity to sustain their activities and things like that. But also this issue of high poverty levels across Africa, which makes it difficult as well to undertake actions and just limited capacity in general. In terms of opportunities, youth engagement was also highlighted again because of the way they're interacting with the government authorities. So that shows positive momentum in climate action. There was also collaborative networking that's on the surge in Africa, so between grassroots organizations, whether they're green enterprises or just civil society organizations, that has been noticeable as well. In terms of opportunities as well, so it was mentioned that success stories from Canada and also countries like South Africa and Nigeria that are taking the leadership around carbon pricing could serve as a success story or model for other African countries. So that's an opportunity that was raised as well. In terms of threats, so one major thing that was highlighted was some sort of societal and systemic issues like poverty that most African countries have to deal with. And so climate action becomes particularly difficult when attention is elsewhere, feeding families, for example. And then the other threats were things like, increased pollution from oil companies, and also the influence that political bullies and fossil fuel companies have around government. So like, bribery and corruption is an issue that really slows climate action, because money rolls in Africa, maybe around, it's probably true for the rest of the world. But also the lack of resources and capacity to fully undertake climate action. So that was in summary what our SWOT analysis brought up. So that's it first. I think you're muted, Joe.
Joe, you're muted.
Sorry, I was saying thank you, Jacques. That was brilliant and very instructive, and it was a great example. And Sara, who do we have next?
Yes, next up we have the subcontinent of India.
So Mr. Vishal Gupta will be reporting from the subcontinent of India.
Yeah, okay. Is my screen being seen?
Not at the moment.
How to share?
As you are a co-host though, so you should be able to have the share screen option.
Could you ask somebody else to it? Meanwhile, I'll just sort out this technical issue here.
Yes, next let's have the Europe group present.
James, would you like to speak?
Yeah, so, excuse me. So Tami shared her screen, so you can see our Jamboard. the things I'd like to pick out from it, really, because we really treated this as an out-and-out brainstorming session. So we just captured as many ideas as we could as quickly as possible. So there wasn't a coherent discussion throughout the session that's particularly easy to report on. So there's a couple of things I want to pick out. Firstly, in terms of strengths, there's a real CCL theme to all of the strengths in the way the group felt. So it's based on core things like the policy, on the levers that we focus on, and on the values that we work by. And then when you look at the other strengths that got mentioned, they were often built on one or two or more of these core structural elements. So when we looked at our strengths, for instance, at the moment within the European Parliament, where we are where we have now some high value relationships that are allowing us to ask and engage at a level that we couldn't do 6 to 12 months ago, it's built on working in that style and in those ways. So it's a real connection back to the core values and the framework that CCL has given us. When we were talking about opportunities, it almost felt like a target-rich world. There are more opportunities than you can shake a stick at, and there are more opportunities than we can actually do. So it's really then down to us to go through those opportunities and go which ones relate to us directly and are most accessible for us to act on. The third theme that came out, which was particularly interesting, which we only noticed at the end, is whilst there are a variety of negatives in our world, there was a tendency for us to see some of those as weaknesses, whereas actually they were external threats. So we almost take responsibility for things that are outside of our control and that we just have to live with as problems. So that's my short summary of the European breakout session.
Brilliant. Thank you, James. And we have only 7 minutes left, so I'm going to ask people to try to go quickly. It might be useful if what we do is I will put up a slide where we're just documenting some of what's being reported in, and just please give us your reports. Sorry for the time crunch.
All right. Next up is, I see Vishal's got his screen, so that'll be the subcontinent of India.
Go ahead.
All right. Hi, everyone. So we had a very fruitful discussion, and we had people from 3 nations discussing this issue. So far as strengths are concerned, we felt that our ability, especially in Southeast Asia, the younger generation's ability to communicate through social media is extremely strong. And therefore, we have an ability to generate something called as a storm communication. And we can reach to a lot of people simultaneously. We have very active indigenous communities and whose shared values, traditional shared values, cultural values towards nature are common, especially in Southeast Asia. We have communities in Rajasthan who in fact protect trees. You would have heard stories of people hugging trees to prevent the developers from cutting it. And we feel that something to do with a common cultural value, since we were a larger minor Asia, and therefore a lot of our values being common, it's easier to build communities and local communities, of course, and even coming to regional communities will be easier for us, and that we see as a strength. And from those strengths drive also our opportunities, which is that within India itself, especially Northeast, we have a lot of individual groups working towards environmental protection, not necessarily being a part of CCL, but we can certainly harness them. And as a concerted group, we could join. We also saw some opportunities in R&D, encouragement towards R&D, towards carbon pricing and carbon policy. And there is an opportunity for us to push the government towards joining the carbon coalition. The government of India is seeing carbon pricing favorably, and certainly environmental policy. And I think we are trying to be somewhere on the top so far as our commitments and goals are concerned. And that's how we have action orientation. I think it's a human weakness. We need to push our communities to, give time to this CCL community and come up with ideas, and of course at grassroots level, whatever they can do. Again, a weakness was that we need to become part of coalitions like the climate carbon coalition. Threats, there were a few unique threats that came up. One was a chance of being misunderstood, which is true whenever a new initiative is taken. Somebody was mentioning that people confuse carbon tax with some kind of a tax that we had to give. But I think this needs to be clarified over a period of time. We need a new draft policy. The current draft policy is not very favorable, and we shall be working towards it. That's a threat. Water crisis is a looming crisis the world over, and majorly in India also. Another issue we felt was pricing parity for poorer nations, if this needs to be taken up. These were from Asia.
Joe, you're muted.
Sorry. Thank you very much. I'm going to put up a slide where we're just kind of recording what's being said, and ask that we continue and do the rest of these debriefs quickly. Thank you for all the work people have done to create these Jamboards. We're going to be looking at them.
Great, thank you. And while Joe does that, we have 3 more groups yet left. Next is going to be Latin America, then US and Canada, and then the UNFCCC COP26 group. So off to you, Latin America.
Awesome. So we had a very wonderful discussion, and we found strength in some of the international context about US rejoining the Paris Agreement and the new prices set by Canada and the election of Joe Biden for hope as US regains some leadership internationally. We recognize the solidarity and commonality across the region, and the technical understanding of what are the policies and some of the best approaches that could be implemented in each one of these national contexts. Additionally, the centering the political conversation has become more common because of the social situation. So talking about these topics have become easier. So that is a great strength and opportunity for us. As weaknesses, we found that carbon pricing is not at the center of the conversation around climate change. And we have the threat and weakness that economies in Latin America are extraction based, as well as that, and this is more like organization, is that the resources that we find at CCL are more US focused, and then there is a need for regionalize them. This brings important opportunities that are interlinked to elections and reconnecting the price of carbon to the economic reactivation. We find that there are important opportunities as the creation of relationships with other groups to harness and amplify mobilization and recognize the importance of youth engagement to create community in Latin America around CCL and carbon pricing. And we also think that some opportunities are creating step processes for onboarding new members with actions of different levels of impact. And other opportunities that are important for the region is to capture the impact of fracking in the carbon pricing, and some of the threats that, we discussed a lot of it, but some of it is like the slowdown because of the focus of the economic rebuilding and so that's where we find that it's important to reconnect in how we can actually accelerate and strengthen that part. And some external threats are corruption and the lack of environmental focus from government. That was super fast, but there's more in the Jamboard.
We will be capturing all of those additional insights. Thank you, Isatis, for that. We have two more to go. Right?
Yes, and next up is the US and Canada.
All right, I'm gonna keep this super short, and yeah, please refer to our great Jamboard. But for strengths, definitely the word that came up to my mind was leadership. Strong action from Canada on carbon pricing, and rhetoric on good rhetoric on supporting carbon pricing from people in the incoming administration. For weaknesses and threats, the word that comes to mind is division. There is division between, how people between people communicating with each other. There's division between what leaders say and what they actually do. So there's things like greenwashing and incrementalism, which isn't enough. And also there's division between I think the powers in Canada, definitely between provincial and the federal system. And then now going to opportunities, the words that come to mind is building better. So we can definitely build better with our infrastructure. We have that opportunity. We can build better relationships with our Indigenous people who are at the front lines of this, and also with more conservatives and other people that we might not normally interact with. So I'll just keep it at that.
Great. Thank you, Marlo.
Thank you, Marlo. And we didn't have enough people in our Asian Oceania group, so they all joined the UNFCCC discussion. So that is our last group.
Okay, great. Well, I will then switch over to our Jamboard because it's all there. So just very quickly, you see in the pink, we identified some issues relating to communication, disinformation, efforts to fundamentally confuse people, but also opportunities to correct that. There's rising levels of public discourse about science-based policy, especially in the COVID context. And so that becomes an opportunity for us to be able to build more awareness and understanding. The CCL way, as James was saying about the Europe group, the tools that we have at our disposal are turning into strengths and opportunities generally. Motivational listening, the ability to help people in public office learn more about their own work and do better, and recognize where it serves people that have asked them for that. Border carbon adjustments are becoming an opportunity to drive ambition and cooperation, and that's a strength of the policy that we advocate. There are opportunities to work within networks like the ECOS community, education, communication, outreach, stakeholders. Our hope is that there's going to be a serious ECOS effort at COP26 and that we'll be helping to lead that. Of course, we also dealt with those weaknesses and threats, like, for instance, low levels of public engagement around climate in some places. How can we change that? The fact that supranational negotiations tend to only include nation states, so we're trying to alter that dynamic. And finally, I think it's worth just saying that collaboration in 2021 is one of the great opportunities. It kind of came up in a lot of the different aspects of what we were discussing, how collaboration makes new things possible, changes the political dynamics. And, there's a value question there. What is it that we are valuing as we do this work together? Now, just before we close, I want to go back to the beginning of this meeting. This is the word cloud that was generated. And the reason you see carbon so big is that people answered in phrases. And so we saw carbon come up as a common term. But when you look at how all of these different words break down, there's a real hopefulness, I think, that people were sharing, that we are more connected because of the crises that we've been facing in 2020, and that becomes a way of working better together in 2021. The progress that we've seen, like Canada's recent announcement, but also carbon budgeting at the national level in the UK, the community of people that we are here in Citizens Climate, and how we're able to work together. All of these things build momentum. And so I just want to kind of close today's meeting with this message. that, you know, essentially despair is not allowed. There are hard times facing people everywhere, and these crises are huge. And we're just, you know, small groups of individual people trying to make the world better. But that is how you build political will, right? This is the thing we talk about in our most basic training for new volunteers, that it's political will doesn't come from political leaders. It comes from the people that they serve and that they represent. And working as citizens to build that foundation for rising political will is in many ways the great opportunity ahead of us. So keeping that in mind, let's build on our values, let's work to empower each other and to empower others as well. And let's live in hope for 2021. And a final point that I think it's worth sharing is, of course, we're going to be back doing this again with more detail, with more of a kind of structured strategic focus on January 27th. Between now and then, you'll have a lot of more local meetings. You'll deal with a lot of these things we've talked about. We'll be sharing insights that came out of this meeting to make sure that you're up to speed on not just the breakouts you were in, but what other people were thinking about and how that connects to their activities. And we welcome your feedback. We'd like to hear from you. You'll be hearing from us with the new international newsletter in January. But once again, thank you for putting in your time. Thank you for helping us to think about the opportunity landscape of 2021. And please have a safe and, if you can, happy end to 2020 and a good new year.
We would love a photo, Joe. And and I would like to try an experiment, and tell me if it's crazy, but can we try together on this video right now to say, we are unstoppable, another world is possible 3 times together? Can we try that? Everybody unmute, and then we'll take photos. So unmute yourself. We are unstoppable, another world is possible. Wait.
It's possible.
Unstoppable.
What is possible?
I think it's going to be super.
It's possible.
Another world is
Thank you.
We are unstoppable.
Another world.
Everyone can raise a hand.
Unstoppable.
Yeah.
Possible.
Raj.
Unstoppable.
This is what I think. We are
Unstoppable.
We are unstoppable.
I love it.
Unstoppable.
Another world is possible.
So B12 is better.
Another
I
world.
hope we're able to collaborate better on climate solutions than we are on this chat.
That's clear.
I think you need to learn to be more firm with us.
Sorry.
Thank you.
Thank you and bye-bye then.
Thank you.
Everyone.
What happened there?
In the world.
Thanks for the laugh. Bye.
Happy New Year.
Happy New Year.
Happy Christmas.
Bye bye.
New Year and Merry Christmas.
Take care.
Thank you. So inspiring.
Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas.
Hi,
This
everybody.
is
Navidad. Buen Natal.
Hi, Judy.
Joy Noel.
Yay. Hi.
Bye-bye.
This is
Hi, Angelica. Cathy. Love to Sophia.
Love, yes, I will, Angelica. Feliz Navidad.
We can overcome the corona situation.
Likewise.
Thank you.